we are back with poverty in India in continuation, and today we are going to talk about the poverty line. And poverty line is a measurement to show that people who do not get the barest of minimum are below this poverty line, and they are uh, stamped as BPL, and anyone above that particular level of the minimum requirement is above the poverty line. So just go through this. It is based on how do we define it. It's very important and interesting. So it is a cutoff point on the line of distribution which usually divides the population of the country as above the poverty line and below the poverty line. See, you can see I've written, you've made this poverty line above the poverty line and below the poverty line, or poor and non-poor. So people who are below BPL are poor, and people with people who have enough, a little, I mean, their minimum is fulfilled, they are above, a little bit above it, they are known as non-poor. So they call above the poverty line. And as per this measure, the number of people below poverty line is called the head count. So we're going to talk about head count. So you sometimes get a question as what do you mean by head count? So number of people below poverty line. And if you are talking about the head count ratio, what is it? It is a percentage of people living below the poverty line. So the head count ratio is what is known as the percentage of people living below the poverty line. So we see that in poverty line, how is it determined? This is what we will see. So it is basically determined on the basis of the calorie intake, but by this there was a Tendulkar committee which gave its report, and they said it is based on that, it is based on your intake, calorie intake. And we have another Oxford researchers who said it was based on the outcomes, like do you have is there malnutrition there, or what is the child infant mortality rate, or do you have clean drinking water, do you have access to certain things which are the basic necessities for human being. So in our country, it was Dadabhai Naroji in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule, like in India, he was the first person sort of who gave us an insight to the extent of poverty in India, and he used and he called it the jail cost of living. That means, that is, he used the menu of a prisoner, and then he calculated it in terms of the prevailing price, and then he came to what is known as the jail cost of living. You must go through this book or this concept. It is very important. I mean, it's very interesting. And today we are going to talk about, in today's date, poverty line is determined on the basis of monthly intake of calories, or it is rather, it's a monthly per capita expenditure. That was done by the Tendulkar committee. And then we have what is known as the multi-dimensional poverty index, which was the researchers were from Oxford, and they decided that poverty is not just go through this, that poverty is just not just an intake of something, or there are certain things which are a must, like they put it down as we have what is known as remember the human index, development index, for that, the study that they made. So in the same manner, they talked about 10 indicators like child mortality, nutrition, and then access to housing, electricity, sanitation, clean water, etc. So what we have is the monthly per capita expenditure method. One method is that is monthly per capita expenditure method, MPCE, which is used to determine the poverty line. Now, according to this method, money value, that is the per capita expenditure of the minimum calorie intake, is calculated. And the minimum calorie intake was fixed at 2400 for the uh, rural areas and 2100 for the urban areas. And why so? Why higher for rural? Simply because greater physical work is done there as compared to what is done in the urban areas. So poverty line then was decided on the basis at 2011-2012 recommendations of the Tendulkar Committee, which used the MPCE poverty line, and the per capita expenditure was worked out to be 816 rupees for rural areas and 1000 for the urban areas. So that is what you will see. You can see for yourself that I've just written a few. And now continuing on with this, it was found that based on this, the MPCE, that is monthly per capita expenditure, it was found that the poverty line or the people below poverty line stood at 21.9%, and the other, that means the multidimensional poverty index by the Oxford scholars, stood at 27.9%. And so that was there. Now, why is it, now the thing is, why is it important? The question is, why is it important that we have what is known as the importance of these poverty numbers, BPL, below poverty line? Because it is important for the center, because it allocates funds to the states based on these numbers for the poor. Any scheme for the, it has schemes like the subsidized food schemes like Antodaya Ann Yojana, or there are certain health schemes like the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. And it was the Niti Aayog, that is National Institute for Transforming India, who said that the funds can be dispersed based on these numbers, based on the numbers as who are the people who are below poverty line, and they get the benefits of these poverty alleviation programs from time to time. And okay, just go through this. So why is it so important? That is the thing. And sometimes, now these two scholars, like when you're talking about the monthly per capita expenditure and the other one, now based on that we feel that there is a question, as I've put here, like you can see, that even though according to the monthly per capita expenditure, if a person was above the poverty line, according to the other school or the Oxford school, that is the MPI, which talked about outcomes, if a malnutritioned person was to be found there, or there were people who were dying, there were, say, because nutritional deaths, or they did not have the basic minimum regarding housing and cleanliness and all, then they were supposed to be counted as below poverty line. And that explains why their percentage of below poverty line is much more than the Tendulkar report, as we see.